Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, and somebody invested in publishing. And so, in the last few weeks, I've been doing a series of videos in which I talk to authors about their various approaches to publishing, the different paths that they have taken. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is about agents and how you use agents and how agents get paid and what agents can get you and what they can do and whether you need one or not. So it seemed like the smart thing to do would be to interview an agent. And fortunately, I have one of those. So we're going to be talking to Stacey Glick of Distal, Godrich and Barrett, a boutique agency in New York City. And I think you'll find that she has lots of information to give. So I hope you find it interesting. So enjoy. So today I get to do something that I don't think we've ever actually done anything like this before, but I get
Great.
to interview my agent. This is Stacey Glick,
Hi.
who I have been with for
A long
20
time.
years, 20, over 20 years, I think, at this point.
An adult lifetime.
Yeah. Yes, our relationship can legally drink.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So, as I was saying to you before we started recording, the purpose of these videos is to just sort of talk about different people's path to publishing, how it works, and so on. So I thought it would be great to get an agent's perspective about what you can do, what people can and cannot do with and without an agent, how you get agents, and so on. So, as I said, it's been 20 years plus since we connected. And in those days, it was about writing a query letter and printing it off and sending it in the mail, sending sample chapters if the agent was accepting sample chapters. And then we'd go back and forth in the mail, and then we'd have phone conversations and so on until you get signed. So, is that still true?
Well, with modern technology, there's certainly no need for hard copies, although the pitch process I think is still somewhat similar. I mean, you still have to kind of put together, you have to create the project that you're submitting. You have to put together the same kind of query letter. That hasn't changed. I think just the only thing that's different is how you get it to agents. And pretty much every agency at this point has on their website how either the agency as a whole wants their submissions received or how individual agents want their submissions received. For a long time, it was via email. And I think that is still the case for a lot of agents and a lot of agencies. But there are also new sites that offer services that are actually free. Perhaps not for the author. I'm not really sure. And I don't use these services, but the Query Tracker, Query Manager, some of
Mm.
the agents in my agency do use that. And it's really kind of remarkable. We did like a little video recently in my office where we got a tutorial, and the amount of information that's offered and how you can modify the form to really be specific to your needs and wants as an agent is really spectacular. And I think for the author, it makes it much easier too, because you can really weed out agents that don't make sense for you, and you can really try to target ones that do.
So maybe we should have started with this, but maybe you could say something about the kind of agency that you work for and the kind of
Yeah.
material that you represent.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. So, I've been with Distal Goddard and Barrett for 25 years. The agency is actually celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. So I was there not quite at the very beginning, but pretty close. When I started there, there were, I think, six of us, and now there's 17.
Oh, wow.
Um, so we've really grown. And we have a really terrific group of agents and support staff to handle all the back end operations. Because the agency has gotten so big and successful, we have two people in finance, we have two people in rights, and we have actually even another person who handles some back end finance stuff. And so it's really grown into quite a big team, in large part thanks to Colleen Hoover, who we represent, who is, doing really well, needless to say. And we represent all of her titles for both domestic and international. So the agency and the agents at the agency really span almost every category that I think exists in book publishing, at least the ones that are marketable, save maybe poetry. But really anything else that you can think of for any age audience. So all the way from picture books and middle grade and young adult on the children's side and graphic novels as well. And then on the adult side, really across all the categories of fiction and nonfiction. So, not every agent handles all of those things, obviously, but many of us handle many of those things. And so, I think if you kind of go and check out our website, there's a lot of really good information there about each of the agents, about what we're looking for, and, about kind of what our interests are and where we are in terms of projects and types of things that we're interested in looking for. So is that helpful? Should
Yeah.
I dig
Yeah.
deeper?
And we can circle back to that in a second. I just wanted to clarify you are based in New York.
Yeah, the agency is based in New York. Many of us work remotely now. I honestly worked mostly remotely even before COVID, and kind of go in as needed. We do a lot of our meetings now virtually, and we have two agents who are on the West Coast who are in LA. So we do have, other parts of the country kind of represented, but our main home base is New York.
Because people always used to say, if you want an agent to represent you to the big houses, for the most of the time, you want a New York agent. Do you think that's not true anymore?
I don't think it's as true as it was. And to be honest, I think there have always been some successful agents that have not worked in New York.
Mm.
But I think back in the day, and that can even be 10, 15 years ago, not decades and decades, I think a big part of the business was being in New York and doing the lunches and doing the drink states and doing the, kind of schmoozing that is, I think publishing is known for. And I don't think as much of that. I mean, it's still happening, but I don't think it's as important as it used to be, number one. And number two, I mean, FaceTime is always a good thing. I think the agents who aren't based in New York still come in and do those meetings. They just do them in a much more, strategic and shorter time span. So instead of it being drawn out over the whole year, they come for a week or two a year and see lots and lots of people.
Mm.
So I do think there are a lot of successful agents now that are all over the place. Um, but I do also believe there is an advantage to being in New York. This is where all the publishing houses are, all the big publishing houses. There are some independents that are elsewhere. And while there are not a ton of in-person meetings happening these days, still the opportunity is there if it's presented and if it's needed to, make those sorts of meetings happen.
Mm.
So New York is definitely just, the publishing hub of the universe, and I think that is still true.
Mm-mm. So, coming back to the questions of what you represent, let's talk about what you personally represent and how you make decisions about what kind of clients you take on.
Yeah. So I will say that because I've been doing this as long as I've been doing this, and I have, developed such good relationships with so many of my clients, who thankfully have been able to do, many books, and multiple books. I'm not signing up clients and projects the way I used to, and the way some of my, younger, more junior agents are, where they're really actively trying to build and develop and grow their list. And my list has changed over the years. I mean, I definitely have always represented a lot of nonfiction, across categories, and not as much fiction. And I think that has become even more true as time has gone on, because the fiction business has just gotten so difficult. Not that the nonfiction business is any piece of cake either, but that's just, I think where my focus has shifted a little bit. And then I would say probably, I don't know, at this point, a dozen years ago, um, my kids were little and the industry was starting to change a bit to really open up to children's books in a very different way than I think it had in the past. So I went through a period of time where I was doing a lot of children's books, and I still do a lot of children's books. So that has shifted too. I've always done a little bit of YA, but more picture books and middle grade. And I still continue to work in those areas quite a bit. Middle grade also has gotten really tough, the same way that, kind of the adult fiction market has gotten things like Barnes and Noble not taking middle grade novels anymore, not taking hardcovers, making it really difficult for publishers to make money when, major retailers are only taking paperback editions of their book. So, but I do think a lot of that is cyclical. I do think that the market goes through these phases, where middle grade sort of runs its course and then, YA has a run and then it kind of all circles back eventually.
Mm.
So that's what I would say, sort of broadly. And I mean, in terms of the nonfiction categories, I really do everything from very practical stuff intended to kind of help people live better lives to narrative across the board, history, biography, memoir, science, anything that sort of feels like there's a bigger story to tell. Um, I'm open to on the nonfiction side. And fiction, like I said, I'm really pretty limited in that area now. Not really signing up new clients in that space, just working with existing authors.
And I'm when I introduce myself at conventions and things, and I talk about what I write, I always at some point say that I'm an agent's nightmare because,
Not at all. Not even
but
a little.
but I mean, we've done I think 27 books together,
Wow. Amazing.
and they are all over all over the place, which is not how you build a career, but you know.
Well, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. You were so incredibly talented and prolific and hardworking and able to be edited in a way that has made you, I think, very attractive to certain collaborations that we've been able to do. Once things started getting hard for your kind of own individual projects, we're able to shift focus a little bit and partner up with people like Tom DeLonge. And I think you've had a really successful partnership there for the last decade. So, I think we always have to be strategic. We meaning authors and agents together as a team to try to figure out, kind of what works for each party, like what you can write that you want to write that you're interested. I've brought you some ideas for nonfiction over the years, and it's never quite been, right for you, and that's totally fine. But and I also am happy always to try to work with ideas and projects that you're excited about that I can try to, find that right fit. Like I think one of the most important things, probably the most important thing that I do is, I act as a person who pairs, it's like a puzzle, putting together the pieces of the puzzle. I have to find the right editor and publisher for my author's books. And that is a really individual thing that looks very, very different in each and every submission. And
Mm,
it's changed a lot over the years. The editors have changed, the publishers have changed, the whole structure of the industry has changed.
mm,
So it really, it's an education process, kind of over and over evolving
mm,
for us as agents and for you as authors to sort of figure out, what you're going to write that is going to be able to find the audience it deserves and the publisher who's going to be able to get it to that audience.
mm, mm. And I think there's a lot of misinformation or misconceptions about how how agents make their money. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of agents don't make a lot of money, just like a lot of authors don't make a lot of money.
Mm,
Um, I think the key to being a successful agent, I mean, of course, you need a lot of best-selling authors, and that's ideal, but it's not the only way to make it work. I mean, if you have enough authors and enough projects that are selling both on the sort of front end, me selling books to the publisher, and then on the back end making royalties, that's where you can start to build up and grow and develop a list that is actually financially stable. Um, but in terms of the money, the actual money part of it, so the author gets 85% of any monies that are made on the book for an advance against royalties and any royalties, and then the agent takes 15%. And that's for the life of the book. So, whatever the advance is, we would commission 15%, and then whatever the royalties are, if there are royalties, most books don't ever earn back their advance. It is a statistic that was confirmed to me at a conference last year by a finance person at Simon and Schuster, who
mhm.
gave me, put up a little like spreadsheet on the thing and said eight, 8 to 9 or 7 to 8. It was in the 7 to 9 range. Books that they publish don't earn back their advances, which seems like a really poor business model to me. But I guess they make enough money from their big, big celebrity, name brand bestsellers that they can make it work.
Say that again. 7 to 9.
Out of 10 books, out of
Oh,
10 books don't earn back their advances. Sorry, I think
wow.
I got confused because I was trying to remember, was it 7 or 8 or
Right,
not?
right, right.
I think it was
Wow.
7 or 8, around, yeah, 70 to 80% don't earn back their advance, which there are so many problems in that statement
Mhm.
that, you know, we will not solve in this conversation.
That's too bad because I was hoping you were going to fix the industry.
It would be nice if we could figure out a better way. But there's a lot of problems in the business of books, in terms of how they operate and how they come up with their advances, and how they overpay for most books. And then just the way books are sold to the consumer through retailers, but there's the ability for the retailers to return the books.
Mhm.
So there's not a whole lot of incentive for the retailers to actually sell them. They can just send them back. So there are a lot of things that I think make the business of selling books pretty challenging.
Mhm.
But that said, there are wonderful books published every year. There are surprise hits, that, are unexpected bestsellers that do really well. And that's either by review-driven attention, by consumer-driven attention, by award attention. So, I think there are a lot of different ways in which a book can be seen as successful, even if it's not necessarily, a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. Obviously, one of the biggest changes since you and I have been working together has been the explosion of very small presses and self-publishing.
Yep.
As an agent, do you are all your clients exclusively, maybe this is too personal, are your clients exclusively traditionally published, or do some also do self-publishing projects on the side, or what?
I think that's a perfectly fine question to ask. And especially since, many people who might be seeing this might be in that, place where they're trying to figure out, do we try traditional or continue to try traditional, or do we go self-pub or some combination of both? So, I don't think there's any real right answer to that question. I think we are always looking to traditionally publish our authors because that's where our business is and that's where the money is. But we went through, and you remember this well. I don't remember exactly when it was, maybe 10 years ago, where
Mm,
we hired somebody who had created sort of a self-pub imprint within the agency, and we were not the only ones doing this at the time. Um, I think a lot of authors were wanting to do more with self-publishing and explore those options. And so we wanted to give our authors an opportunity for that. And so we set it all up. We got accounts with all of the ebook retailers. We helped them with design and copy editing and, all sorts of services. We essentially became like a little mini independent self-publisher. And we did it for a few years, and it just became too laborious
Mm,
for what we were getting in return financially. It just didn't make sense.
mm,
So we did stop that, and now, I think that if authors, it's really individual. If an author has a book that, we haven't been able to place traditionally, which is always kind of the ideal, and they want to self-publish it, that's certainly something that they can consider doing. I don't necessarily know that it's something that we would do for them, although I'd be happy to have that conversation. But I do think there is potentially a place where
mm.
authors can be traditionally and self-published. Um, it just depends on what they're doing, and what their goals are for the book, and what makes sense for that author and that book at the time.
I mean, it seems like we've seen in the last few years a number of instances where publishers seem to be sort of hesitant to take on a project and then watch what happens after it's been self-published. And then if it does well, then they pick it up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, I there was definitely a period of time in which there were some very successful authors who were self-published, who were then picked up by traditional publishers and agents. Jane Distel in my office was one of the agents who was incredibly successful at that. She brought over number of women's fiction best-selling authors like Colleen Hoover and Taryn Fisher. I don't know all of them, but there are a bunch, and did big, big deals. Um, some of which worked, some of which didn't. And I think there was sort of it like rode this wave, and then the wave crashed. And
Mm,
that was the kind of end of that. I think in this market, it's really hard, close to impossible to take a self-published book and sell it traditionally, except in the very rare circumstance that the book has exploded and done so well. Something like, a bunch of years ago, The Martian, I think, was one of those books.
yeah.
I mean, there have been a handful of them, um, of course, over the years, but none that I recall hearing about very recently.
I mean, somebody like Matt Dinneman, who did the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, that they were self-pubbed first, and I think he has a deal now with, I think it's Ace, but I
Yeah, okay.
suspect it's a print-only thing. He's
So, yeah, I think for genre fiction, that
right.
might be a little bit more of a reality than other types of fiction. Um, and there's also Entangled, which is an interesting, like, romance women's fiction publisher, and they started out as ebook only, and they've had a lot of success over the last few years. And now we just had a meeting with a film person who has a deal with them where many of their books are being adapted and produced for film. So, certainly there are places where there are options
Mm,
that might be outside of, traditional, that could be really, really interesting, for the right book and the right author
mm,
and the
mm.
right time. So much of it is about timing too.
Can you say something about those rights issues in terms of both foreign for print and film, TV, such?
So as far as self-pub or
No, as far as simply what an agency like yours provides.
got it. I was going to say there's really no opportunity to sell ancillary rights for a self-published book, um, unless we've handled it. But it's really it's just it's too challenging. But for traditionally published books, where we retain, in most cases, in almost all cases, we retain film and television. We try to partner up with a co-agent. We split the commission with the co-agent, so it's still 15% to the author, but we would split 7.5 with the co-agent. And the co-agents are generally based in Hollywood. There are some in New York, and they have relationships with the producers and the people who are putting the pieces of that puzzle together to try to, get elements together that they can use to sell a project to, someone who can actually finance it, a studio or network. And so we work with co-agents for, on a kind of on an individual basis. Um, I think there are some agencies who work exclusively with one co-agent, but we sort of pick and choose co-agents based on the project. And so we kind of, think about who might be right for which project and kind of pitch it out accordingly. And then as far as foreign goes, so we have a really big, robust foreign rights department because we have so many authors who sell so well internationally. It really blew up. Jane Distel represented Barack Obama's first book, Dreams from My Father, when he was still in law school, graduating from law school. And so when he became president, or even before he became president, when he spoke at the Democratic National Convention that really launched his political career, that book, which had done modestly well, took off everywhere. And it's been published in, I think, almost every country and language that exists on Earth. Um, so so we really grew our rights department from there. So now we're really in a position to be able to successfully sell those rights for our books through there's co-agents in every country. So we work with the co-agent to try to place and sell our books to publishers in other territories and in other languages. And not all books sell in other territories and other languages. In some cases, we sell world rights to the publisher, and then the publisher tries to place those titles in the international and other markets. And in other cases, we keep those rights, the author and the agent, and then we use our internal group to try to make that happen. So with your first book that we sold in how many territories? A lot.
28, I think.
28. So that was, I would say that was a huge success story, The Mask of Atreus, where we
Yeah.
sold the book in the US and then we were able to also sell it internationally. And that was before our rights department was really great, right? Did we sell the rights or the publisher did? No, the publisher did, right?
No, no, we kept well, what happened actually was that we sold it overseas before we sold it to Penguin.
Oh, I'm
It
forgetting.
went,
It's been so
yeah,
long.
it was picked up in Greece first.
That's right, for a lot of money.
And then, yeah, and so that
That's right.
immediately took the world rights
Right.
off the table when it went to Penguin.
That's right. I'm remembering now. Ooh, that was fun.
It was.
That was a fun time.
Yeah.
Um, that's right, because yeah, there is a Greek element to the book, and the Greeks really were interested in that. Yeah, I think they paid something like $30,000 for it.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
a lot of money for a smaller market.
Yeah. And they
Um,
were not the only ones. I think we got like 60 grand from Norway.
yeah, it
It
feels, I'm not going to say that doesn't happen anymore because
was-
of course it does, but it feels like that was, I don't know, a different time, a different place, a different industry, but it was great. And yes, obviously those things can happen when you have a book that, hits the right market at the right time. You can have that kind of success where you're not only selling in the domestic market, but in international as well. I mean,
Mhm.
I think, it's interesting because watching the film industry over the years, I think that's one of the things that they've tried and successfully managed to do is take these movies that are hits here, but are like massive blockbusters around the world, and that's really where they make so much of their money.
Mm, mm, mm.
But the book business is not the movie business. It's very different.
Right, right. So, I mean, I don't want to keep you too long, but I was thinking, I'm sure that what a lot of people are wondering, and you've already said you're not sort of getting a lot of new clients at the moment, but obviously other agents in
Yep.
your office are. What are people looking for when you first get approached, whether it's through email or at a conference or a convention, I don't know, when somebody approaches you at the bar and,
Yep.
and
Or in
says,
the bathroom,
"Oh God,"
wherever.
does that
That
happen?
hasn't that it has happened, but not in a while.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think it depends on the agent and it depends on their own personal sort of interests. I mean, I think certainly on the fiction side, commercial is wonderful. There are certainly some agents at my agency who are looking for genre stuff, who are more interested in like sci-fi, fantasy, other types of genre fiction. Horror has become pretty popular of late. But that horror goes through phases where it's like no one wants horror, and then all of a sudden everybody wants horror because there's like a book that hits, and I think we're in a good place with that right now, but I don't know how long that will last. Um, but I think commercial, I think, rom-coms are great. I think since COVID, people have wanted lighter stuff. So rom-coms and, you know, kind of commercial women's fiction, we're going to call it, is sort of always a category that can work because I think the appeal can be really broad. Um, Historical is harder, but historical fiction, there are some wonderful opportunities for, sharing stories about either true stories that have been fictionalized or just, creating fictionalized historical worlds and narratives. Um, so I think commercial is kind of key, voice is key. All the things that people want when they read a wonderful book need to be there. And, I would say, and I think this is true in general of both publishers and agents. I don't think I don't think they do as much editing as they used to do. So you're really looking for books that are in very, very good shape, that have been either professionally or close to it edited, that are clean. Not books that have a germ of an amazing idea but are a mess,
Mm,
and really need a lot of work to be put together. So I do think that is important,
mm,
uh, that the work that authors are submitting at the agent stage really be, very ready to go.
mm, mm,
Not to say they have to be perfect. I mean, certainly there can be editorial changes that can be made at any point, but I do think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're putting out a book that's not, really, really ready to go.
mm. That's interesting. And to what extent are you looking at a single book, and to what extent are you looking at a career potential?
I mean, the ideal is always career potential. It's wonderful. So you're looking for an author who has that kind of ability, talent, who you feel has this, storytelling ability that feels character development, that feels, like it could be something that could carry over to other books. Um, but ultimately, it's about the first book. It's about the book that is gonna sell to start, because in most cases you're going to get a one book deal.
Mm,
In some types of genre fiction, you could possibly do a two or three book deal if it's a series, but most of the time a publisher is not going to be willing to take that risk. They're going to just buy the one book and see where that goes. And then, like what you and I did for so many years is still a possibility, which is if one publisher publishes your book and it doesn't do well, or you didn't have a great experience, you have a second book, you don't publish it with them, you go elsewhere.
mm,
You can sort of move around and find your way in another part of the market. Um, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
mm,
So I think we did that pretty successfully for a long time, in part because you were able to write in so many different categories. So it was great when the adult fiction wasn't working that you could go and do a middle grade series, because the middle grade editors didn't care about what had happened on the adult side.
mm,
If there was a track record that was declining, or, something else was going on with sales. So I think being able to do that is rare, but I think that was part of the reason why you've had so much success over the course of your writing career.
mm, mm.
Pivot, you know,
Right.
isn't working, let's try something different.
What do you think about authors who try to anticipate the needs or wants of the market?
I don't really know that there's a good way to do that.
Mm,
Um, Especially because one, the market changes pretty quickly, and two, there's a very long period of time from the time you write a book until the book is published.
mm,
So there might be something you're seeing or sensing now, but will it be that way in 2 years or 3 years when the book comes out? I mean, look, if you or anybody else can figure out what that is going to look like, then that's great. And if publishers see something in a project that feels like we're, moving in that direction, then that's a wonderful thing.
mm,
But I think more often than not, it's, you get this flood of books after something happens, and then it kind of it's overdone, like, I mean, this is maybe an obvious one, but COVID, there were a lot of books that were being pitched and being presented and being published that had to do with that time, and then people were like completely done with it.
mm,
That's I think what started the whole like rom-com and lighter books, people really wanting reads that were a little bit less serious or less depressing, to really go back to the days of like reading for escapism.
Interesting. I was going to ask you to play Nostradamus for a second, and we said that publishing industry has changed a tremendous amount in the time that we've been working together. Where do you see things going? I mean, it seems like a lot of publishers increasingly seem to be struggling with the profit margins that they have. There seems to be a lot of inconsistency in terms of what publishers are generating and where they're making their money. Where do you think we're going to be in 10 years?
I think we'll probably be similar to where we are now. Maybe there'll be some new technology that will take things in a different direction. I mean, AI is a big
Mm,
conversation in question that I don't think any of us really know yet what that's going to look like. I mean, that's across every industry. That's not just book publishing, but certainly it affects book publishing dramatically. So conversations are just starting to be had about what that looks like for books, for authors, for contracts. I don't know, but it reminds me, the one thing that it reminds me most of in my career is when we started talking about ebooks, which at this point was probably 25, probably soon after I started working in the industry, is when we started having those conversations. And I just remember, lots of meetings at tables and people saying, "Oh, ebooks are never going to be a thing. They're never going to, make money like print books." And that's changed, right? I mean, print books still make more money than ebooks, but ebooks are definitely a factor, especially for certain kinds of books. Um, and I think the last few years, what has changed is audiobooks have had a huge, huge increase in popularity and readership, which I think is great. I'm listening to a lot of books now, and it's a wonderful thing.
mm,
And I think, people sometimes there was this feeling like if you're listening to a book, you're not like getting as much out of it as if you're reading it. I don't agree with that. As somebody who works in book publishing, I think any way that you're consuming books is the right way for you and a good way. I know people that do both. They have the ebook and the audiobook, or the ebook and the print book, or the audio and the print, and it's like it's amazing because that's the world we live in. You
mm,
know, everyone's taking in, especially the younger generation, they're taking in media in such an intense and kind of multi-tiered way that how do you compete with that as a book publisher by doing different types of formats, right? And giving people, different options. So I do think that's been really nice to see that audiobooks are actually, in some cases, making some money.
mm.
Um, a real revenue stream like ebooks, like print books. That's great.
Do you think, I mean, has there been talk at your agency, or have you heard of other conversations, either with publishers, where people are moving towards some sort of official stance on AI as to we won't handle books with AI content or anything like that?
Um, no, I don't know enough about it yet because these conversations are sort of ongoing. I
Mm,
mean, I and So I don't know. I mean, there are some publishers who are inserting AI language into their contracts now, like an AI paragraph that we're looking at very carefully, and everybody in our world is looking at very carefully, and really trying to make sure that it is as protective as possible to the author. Um, so that is definitely happening in some, not yet all cases, but I imagine before too long it will be all cases. And and I think too, I mean, it does remind me of when we went through the ebook conversations, which lasted for years and years and years, and then it was like, okay, what's the fair amount for the author to receive? Took a long time for us to get as an industry to the right amount, the fair amount that everybody could agree on is 25%, net for ebook royalty. I mean, it's been that for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't always that. And that's pretty consistent
Mm-hmm.
across, I mean, certainly across the big houses.
Right.
So and same with audio, there's consistent royalties, same with print, consistent royalties. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like for AI, what's going to happen, but we have to be really careful about it.
Indeed. Okay. Well, I think I've already kept you longer than I said I would, so I will.
Oh, but it's so fun to talk to you.
Well, it's great to connect. Now that my son is back in New York, maybe we'll see each other again soon.
Yes, definitely. I would love that. Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Stacey, for your expertise, your insight, your experience, and for sharing it with people who I think, can get a lot out of these conversations. Thank
Well,
you.
I hope so. And if there are any follow-up questions, either from you or anybody who's listening to this, please reach out and let me know.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay.
So that's it. As Stacey said, please feel free to contribute questions or observations in the comments, and we'll see if we can handle anything that comes up. And as ever, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my books, of course. Check out my Patreon page, and thanks to my patrons whose contributions make this channel possible. Check out my merchandise, and I will talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.